Hey guys, it's Pineapple. I hope you guys missed me, but not too much. And of course, I want to take a little time to talk about this week's chapter of My Hero Academia, chapter 342, because we're about to get into the war arc for My Hero Academia, which is obviously going to be the final arc according to Horikoshi, obviously if you believe him. So let's get to talking about the chapter, which is the extreme quiet before the storm, which of course is going to kind of help us segue into this next big major event that's apparently going to be closing out the series. And we've been working towards this for a little bit now, obviously with all the things that have been happening ever since they brought Deku back from his little, kind of stint as being a vigilante. And for a while, we've kind of been in that in-between space, right? With setup for what's going on. But now we finally have a much-needed conversation that happens, of course, in this chapter that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Izuku. We're going to talk about Ochako. We're going to talk about all the things going on in this chapter. But first, we're going to talk about the various traitors that All For One has lingering around in the UA kind of school system area. So we know UA has this kind of evacuee residential area where everyone whose homes have been destroyed, anyone who's been displaced by Gigantomachia, by the fact that Dabi was going around burning stuff, right? You had Shigaraki touching the ground and pretty much wiping whole blocks away. Anyone who's been entirely displaced, they live here now. We knew that, right? But there wasn't a really big picture of how they were living there. Like, where are you putting all these people? And in this chapter, some of those questions start to get answered, right? We see all the different homes. Sadly, it doesn't seem like Ochako's family ended up making millions and millions and millions of dollars, like all the memes have said, right? Doing all the rebuilding, and not yet at least. Maybe when it's actually time to rebuild people's homes, like out in the streets, maybe. But I believe in this chapter we get the information that it was mainly due to Cementos and like Power Loader and stuff, right? Like that all these buildings were able to be built so quickly because cement, they're pretty much made of cement. Kind of his job. So the chapter starts and we see some people talking about we've got new orders. And we see various people walking throughout the street talking about orders that they've been given from All For One. And this pretty much shows us that there are people besides Aoyama, obviously, that are just kind of regular civilians, not really anyone important, not really a hero or anything like that, but regular civilians that have made their way into this space that are supporters of All For One, who are pretty much used for getting messages in and out, or used for kind of doing little things, like affecting what they can pretty much, right? Like obviously you're going to have Aoyama trying to like enact the biggest change in Deku or whatever, or like change the situation. But as we know from All For One, he has 100 kind of fallback plans or kind of background plans, right? So obviously with Aoyama unable to complete his mission, All For One does at least have these random ancillary just kind of background characters to depend on, right? Even if he's not really asking them to do anything too crazy. Their orders are fan the flames, rally the discontented faction that's been keeping quiet and lying in wait. UA is aware that Tamura Shigaraki will be operational in less than a week's time. The school knows the impending danger, but they're keeping it from the common people. So fan the flames, until that fortress is once again an inhospitable place for Izuku Midoriya. So pretty much it seems like All For One knows the nature of heroes, right? I mean, if anyone is going to know the nature of heroes more than anyone else, I think it's going to be All For One, just because of how long he's been around, how many heroes he's had to come up against. I mean, knowing the nature of heroes lets you kind of circumvent them, right? Like the better you know the perfect idea of what a hero is, the better you can kind of make use of that if you're a villain and kind of ruin their life and tear it all apart, as we've seen All For One do. But his plan here seems to be pretty much this. The heroes are going to lie to you people and tell you that everything is fine, things are cool. They know that things are not fine. They know that in a week everything is going to go to hell, and they're keeping that secret from you guys. So I want you to fan the flames of people to start asking questions like, what's really going on here? What are you guys not telling us? Like we accepted Deku to come back to this school, and we accepted all these things under the assumption that we're going to be able to bring it all back, and all these things are going to happen, and all like there's going to be change pretty much. And if they're keeping secrets and if they're not really moving forward or doing anything to change anything, then I could see why that would take away a lot of faith of the civilians here, and why they would be like, all right, well then I'm just going to do what I can to undo the little bit of progress that we've made here already and make sure that Deku can't stay here actually. And maybe it is better if All For One is in control, right? Like those are the kind of things that are going on in the background. Now, catching up with our students at the student dorms, we have Kaminari crashing on the ground and pretty much all the students wandering in after taking some time in the search area, where they surely have been spending a whole lot of time training, looking for villains, and doing various things. I kind of wish that we got to see some of that stuff, but Horikoshi is kind of blowing past a lot of stuff right now. I don't want to say that he's necessarily speeding through the manga or anything, or rushing to the conclusion, but he's definitely taking a brisk pace there, let's say. Like, I feel like in earlier kind of arcs or whatnot, we would definitely see them out in the search area, the students actually patrolling and doing hero work, like the kind of thing that you probably want to see in a story about heroes who've been in school the entire time. It would kind of be nice to see them in patrols, actually doing stuff after reading 300 and something chapters of, them being in class. I guess we'll just save it for the very end of the series, so it's okay. But regardless, we skip over some good content that we could have gotten to have the students all talk about the good content that we could have gotten, and we eventually see Deku looking over at Ochako, thinking about how he hasn't been able to properly thank her yet. Just like that, All Might arrives, reminding us exactly why we were angry at chapter 327 when he showed up all happy-go-lucky and everything after the very dramatic separation between him and Izuku, and he's kind of stayed in that very happy kind of cheery place for the students, which I guess is just him putting on airs because we know that things are very serious and All Might is pretty worried. But I don't know, it just seems very Mickey Mousey to me to have All Might coming in here and making these weird faces and, jokey and laughy and stuff. It's kind of serious right now. And thankfully we do have at least Tsukauchi in the room, I know the fandom's not very happy with Tsukauchi right now, but we do have Tsukauchi in the room kind of showing, the serious tone of things, right? I don't think he even says a word when they ask him what's going on or what the situation is, right? So, and I think that might be just in case things are wired, right? Like just in case there's any sort of communication device or anything, their plan with Aoyama is absolutely top secret. So with Momo asking Tsukauchi like what's going on with Aoyama or anything, and Tsukauchi pointing his finger up pretty much, like not really replying or anything, I feel like that just shows how careful he's being, right? But I guess that doesn't really matter all that much because immediately after All Might starts to begin to discuss his final plans for their final plans really, for the final war, or the second pivotal war is what the chapter says. So maybe there's no bugs because All Might is just giving the plan out here, but it could also be a situation where All Might is explaining the plans to the students. It might not be the actual plan that they go with, it could just be something that he's saying to throw off whoever might be listening, but we actually don't end up seeing it, right? And there's this very important rule that usually happens in stories where if you see a plan, right, if your characters are planning, and you are in the audience and you see the plan, like you hear everything that they're explaining, it's gonna go wrong, right? It is not going to go the way that it is planned. I remember that's kind of how it went in the last arc, right? Or in the last war arc. There was a very clear plan by the heroes of what they were going to do, what they were going to need to do. We got a very detailed kind of summary of everything that they were planning to do, and then we had to watch the situation unfold. And as a reader, if everything kind of just happens the way that they were explaining it was going to happen, that's kind of boring. I mean, it's a little exciting to have the events unfold as they are, but it's a little boring if something doesn't go wrong, right? Here, we aren't actually told exactly what the heroes' plans are. We don't know exactly what their plan is with Aoyama, and we don't know what their plans are for the war in general that All Might is saying that other people have. But in this chapter, we get really little glimpses at what it could possibly be, and I'm going to look at some of these panels in the chapter, not showing them on YouTube obviously because you can get into all sorts of trouble with copyright and stuff, so forgive me guys. But I am going to talk about some of the chapter's panels, and again, I really think that us not hearing the plan or seeing literally the plan spelled out to us directly means, one, for the most part, I believe the plan is going to work. I believe the plan is going to work, or they have contingencies or backup plans or anything, but I believe by the series end, for the most part, the plan that they have ongoing right now is going to work. And I think the plan definitely includes space for a couple things that maybe they aren't expecting, but like they can kind of manage, right? But I definitely think us not seeing the plan kind of clues us in that unlike the first time, this plan has a way better chance of working, just from like a narrative perspective. But there are a couple things that do put a little bit of a glitch in the plan, or throw a little bit of a wrench in the plan, let's say. First off, we have Endeavor. Right? Endeavor is, immediately it's kind of one of the first things that we see, right? Endeavor has been making this really, really sad face anytime anyone talks about, hey, this is what we're going to do to deal with Toya, right? He's been making this really like sad, oh yeah, I forgot. We got to deal with this, don't we, face? And obviously it's because, you're dealing with your son that you thought was dead and he's a villain and all that stuff. We know how his, feelings have to be after the Dabi's dance reveal in the last arc. But I feel like separate from that, Endeavor is 100,000,000% planning on dying. I don't think Endeavor is planning on sticking with the Todoroki family plan. I don't think he's planning on sticking with All Might's plan. I think all of them are planning on trying to save Dabi somehow. And I think Endeavor knows, like somewhere deep inside, right, that this is my son and he is like me. And once, like, if he is like me, once he's obsessed with an idea, once he's set his mind on doing something, there's nothing that's going to stop him. You know what I mean? Like, there's absolutely nothing that's going to stop him. So the same obsessive drive that drove Engie or Endeavor to do all the things that he did in kind of in search of surpassing All Might, right? Take that same drive and then take the trauma that Toya or Dabi has, right? Put those together and you have like the formula for something really, really bad. I feel like you have the formula for someone who's not going to give up no matter what. No matter what the Todoroki family does or says or anything, I don't think you have a situation where you have the kind of person who's going to sit down and have lunch, like Todoroki saying in this chapter, right? Or like Shoto saying this chapter. I don't see it, and it's really sad and it's really tragic, but I do think that at the end of the day in this series, we are going to see kind of like a split between a character who is unsavable entirely, right? So like death is going to be their salvation because they're just unsavable. A character who is savable, right? And a character who is a little bit of both. And I think obviously Dabi is going to be the character who you just can't save. There's just no hope. And it's going to be tragic, and we're going to lose him and Endeavor in like a great almighty fire. Even though I did see an amazing post on Twitter saying, you know, what if the Dabi Phoenix theory is true, right? Where like he burns and then burns away and then comes back. He survives being cremated by Endeavor. That would be really awesome. And then he ends up being like Shoto's final villain, and they do end up getting their fight either way. Then what do you do with him, right? Do you freeze him? Is that going to have to be the solution? How's that going to work, right? If he already beat Getten's ice, I don't think there's any way for you to do that. But yeah, I think Toya is going to be the one that can't be saved, and sooner than later, we're going to get to a little conversation in this chapter between Izuku and Ochako, talking about what I think is going to be going on with the other two characters and what their fates are going to be. So moving forward a little bit, we have the heroes pretty much doing the exact opposite of All for One said was going to happen, and they pretty much admit to everyone that, yeah, Shigaraki and everyone are going to make their move in 4 days. We've got 4 days to head out and take care of it. We're going to head out soon and try to figure out like what we can do. And that leaves everyone kind of like stunned, especially the people who were helping All for One, right? Because All for One is like, this is the nature of heroes. Nothing is changing. And at first you do see the All for One supporter kind of being shocked at the heroes being honest and at heroes changing. And I like how you have Deku at the top of that page, right? As Deku is kind of the leader of this new form of heroism. He's always kind of been that, right? Like him growing up and having a different perspective kind of brought it all the way to this point where things are very different because of Deku, right? Like he's inspired his class, he's inspired, and because of their actions and Ochako and everyone, they're changing society. And I feel like this is just a good page that kind of signifies that, right? That All for One is saying things are going to go one way. I've been alive for hundreds of years. This is just how it happens. This is how heroes are. I know heroes better than you. Follow me, do what I say. And here you have Deku who is like, no, that's not how we're going to do things. We're not going to lie to you guys. We're going to tell you guys what it is. We're all in this together. And that is a very important thing to remember in My Hero Academia, that's the whole point. Everyone is in this together. There's no more separation. There's no more, quirkless, this or that. Like, there's no more separation. Everyone is in this together. Everyone can be useful. Everyone can be helpful without feeling like they're being used, without feeling like they're a tool. And sometimes, even when those situations present themselves, you can be a tool and you can be used for the greater good. And I feel like definitely one of the messages in this series is to not let yourself be misused, right? Aoyama is obviously going to be used to some sort of extent, right? But he's been being misused the entire series to do something bad towards his friends, when now he has the opportunity to be used in the right way. And yeah, that is a little dark and that is a little unheroic, but I feel like that's the point, right? Like, they have to kind of do some unheroic things to beat All for One. So you have this kind of interesting game where both the heroes and the villains are kind of trying to one-up each other by doing things that the other side won't expect, right? And it's this kind of interesting game of cat and mouse that we have here. Getting ahead of ourselves, though, we see that Kota pretty much asks Deku, if he's leaving the school again and what's going on, and it does seem like everyone is going to be leaving the school. We see Snipe, who we haven't seen in a little bit, and, if he is going, it's pretty much over, guaranteed, right? You remember what he did to Shigaraki in the USJ. So, but one thing to focus on here, again, is the reaction of the All for One supporter, who makes like a very unsure, confused face with a smile, where he's like, we didn't really mean for things to turn out this way, right? But no matter what, it kind of seems like it worked out. Deku's leaving, so like now we got what All for One wanted. Deku's leaving. Everything is going to go our way. But I feel like this is actually the perfect situation for Deku to prove the opposite, right? Like, if Deku is able to bring everything back, if the students are able to fix everything, if everything is going to go kind of in their favor and they do end up winning and society is brought back, then it's kind of the ultimate proof that no matter, like, no matter the planning you did, no matter the evil that was going on, right? We still overcame that. Like, by everyone working together, even though there were some among you that were working against you, enough of us came together to bring us forward to like a better future. And I definitely feel like that's very impactful and that's very powerful. There's a lot of like goodbyes in this page. Some of these characters might never see each other again, right? Like, we don't know if Shoto's gonna survive. It doesn't seem like his family is actually coming along with him, like Rei and Fuyumi and Natsuo. We see Bakugo talking to his milfy mom, and we have no idea if those two are ever going to see each other again, right? Like, we just don't know. We see Recovery Girl, we see Nezu, we just see a whole bunch of characters who honestly might never see each other again because anything could happen in this war arc, right? And last arc, it's kind of like, who knows, right? Because it's not the last arc. Here, this is being set up as the finale. So really anything can happen to anybody. So again, I'm really not the happiest of seeing any sort of farewells or any sort of kind of like, separations from people, because it kind of feels very final. So 30 kilometers away from UA, we have a new dorm that's been very, very reinforced. It's called the Makeshift Fortress Troy, and it was pretty much built so, it's very, very sturdy. And there looks like there's stuff on the edges or like kind of on the outside of it that makes me believe that it might move, kind of like the other pods. We know that some of the evacuation pods and stuff have the ability to fly or move and stuff. My kind of tinfoil hat conspiracy theory is that all of the pods and all that stuff is going to kind of form together to form that giant airship whale that we've seen in 2 of Horikoshi's color spreads, I believe. But that's neither here nor there. I do think it's going to turn into the giant whale, but if it doesn't, I'm not going to be too disappointed. That's just going to be like a question for one day. If anyone ever gets to interview Horikoshi and they get to provide a question, I think my one question is going to be, what's the deal with the whale? The giant airship whale in the color spreads, what was that? And that's going to be my question that I get to waste. But from here, we start to get into the final bit of important content in the chapter, and that's of course Deku seeing Ochako outside of his window, much like she saw him way earlier in the series when she was kind of like early getting into her feelings over Deku and whatnot. Here we see Deku seeing Ochako looking out over the tree line and looking out over the city, and he goes over to check how she's doing pretty much. Initially, it's kind of a conversation about like, thank you. Thank you for everything you did for me. I haven't had a chance to say thank you, but you really, really did a lot. Like, you really, really did a lot with what you did. And Ochako does get a little frazzled for a second, going like, it was nothing, and you're always worrying about little stuff, don't worry about it. But as soon as Deku asks her like what she's actually doing out here, her tone very, very quickly changes. Like, even the text bubble itself changes from being a very cloudy, kind of fluffy, floaty one to being way more somber as she reveals what it is that is really going on in her mind. She says that she feels weird because she's thinking about Toga. During her speech on the rooftop for Deku, like on Deku's behalf, she thought about Toga. Ochako talks about how she really doesn't know anything about Toga actually, and this whole time she's been approaching Toga as, the classic hero-villain situation. But this whole series, Ochako's character arc has largely been about caring for people who often get kind of forgotten, or people who tend to not really be thought about in that way, right? Like, heroes are people who people tend to not think need heroes, right? And she wants to be the hero for the heroes. But in this situation, clearly it's the opposite, right? Like, the whole thing of Toga really, really forces her to think, oh yeah, like, Toga's a person. These villains that we're all fighting all have their own situations and circumstances, and I don't know what she's thinking. I don't know what's going on in their heads, but I can't just assume you're a villain, I'm a hero, gotta beat you, go to jail, blah, blah, blah. Obviously you're bad, da, da, da. Like, I can't assume all of that because it's an entire person I'm dealing with. And I feel like that is one of the most important parts of Ochako's character. That is one of the most important things in the series, actually, because Ochako is one of the characters, just like Deku and just like various other characters in the series, that really, really comes at the question of what it means to be a hero. And that's one of the most important questions in the entire series. And again, I feel like her character really, really addresses that quite a bit, mainly due to, again, to her interactions with Himiko Toga and Deku and Night Eye and Aizawa and a lot of characters like that who kind of make us question that as well. So in response, Deku actually says something kind of similar, right? When Ochako says that she knows that Toga is a villain and that they've done all these bad things, but she now has to look at her more like a person who does need her help. And Deku says, that he felt the same way about Shigaraki, that no matter what, he knows that Shigaraki is this, he's done these things, right? Like, he's done all this. But when he saw Shigaraki, he saw the little boy that was standing inside Shigaraki crying, and he thinks that there's maybe no way to avoid a fight between the two of them, but there's also no way he feels like that he can just ignore that he can just kind of dismiss that. And I find it really cool that, like, Deku came over and maybe he was trying to, like, comfort Ochako and he wanted to say thank you and stuff, but it's in this moment where he's not really like trying to comfort her. I think I feel like in this moment where he's connecting with her because he's like, I didn't think anyone else here would feel that way. Genuinely, he didn't expect that. I don't think he expected that from Ochako, and I don't think he expected to be able to vocalize what he vocalized to the One for All holders inside of him and Nana and stuff, to another hero right now who is also feeling the same way. And I feel like that definitely made a good connection between the two of them, just as far as like granting them a better understanding of the kind of hero that both of them are, and that, you know, they're both trying to be. Because although Ochako says that she guesses that the both of them are kind of weird for thinking that way about Toga and Shigaraki, I think it's actually the opposite. I think, yes, it does make them weird in context of the story of like how everyone else acts, but they're absolutely right for wanting to be that way, and they're absolutely right for thinking that way, because that kind of thinking is exactly the kind of thinking that'll make sure that someone like Shigaraki or someone like Dabi or someone like Toga will never happen again in the future. And I do like how in between this conversation between Deku and Ochako, we do have this quick little scene of Todoroki, you know, talking to Bakugo, talking to Ida, talking to Kirishima, and, you know, Ida's like, I have an older brother, of course I'm going to be here for you. And Shoto's kind of like, it kind of sucks, you know, I don't even know the kind of things that my brother likes, but I'm out here trying to save him. And Bakugo goes, it's got to be piping hot udon, right? Obviously, because Shoto loves udon. A lot of the Todoroki family seems like they love eating udon. So obviously, if we're going to keep with the kind of theme of all the characters, then obviously it would fit for Dabi's to be the spiciest, considering he has like some of the most firepower in the family. But yeah, we do get a good look at the main trio, I think, that we're going to be following in this final arc. I know that like Bakugo, Deku, and Shoto have been the main trio for kind of like the second half of the story. In the beginning, it started with like Ida, Deku, and Ochako. And in this kind of final section, I feel like some of the three main characters that are going to see focus are indeed Deku, Ochako, and Shoto, because those are the three that really have a goal in mind here, right? Shoto, like we said earlier in the video, wants to save his brother. I don't think he's going to be able to. I think the tragedy of that is going to be that Endeavor is going to take both of them out. Well, you know, Endeavor himself and Dabi. I think Toga is going to be saved in some way by Ochako. I think Toga is going to live her life of, you know, being a normal girl to whatever that means to her. I do think that is going to be possible. Maybe after some rehabilitation, maybe after something, but I'm sure there is a case to be made for Toga being saved by Ochako. I don't know about like Toga maybe joining UA or anything. Maybe UA can kind of just do whatever they want at this point, right? UA kind of seems like its own damn government. So honestly, if Nezu was like, yeah, we're starting like a rehabilitated villain school, we're just gonna take people who would have been villains or who were villains and like reform them here using UA facilities and UA teachers and stuff like that, I think that'd actually be a pretty good idea. Like My Hero Reform School, that would be like a fun idea for an entirely separate manga, right? Like after My Hero Academia, you just have a whole class of like reforming villains and people who are, you know, these people didn't grow up wanting to be heroes. They grew up wanting to take over the world and blah, blah, blah. But now they're kind of like, maybe like a My Hero kind of Suicide Squad kind of thing. But I'm sure that idea has been pitched 100 times and done to death. So I see Dabi dying. I see Toga Himiko possibly being saved. And of course, I see Shigaraki Tomura in a very weird situation, right? Because I do think that Tenko Shimura, the kid inside of Shigaraki, is going to be saved. Like, the thing he wants the most is to be a hero. So I think he is going to get that. But I do think that Shigaraki, kind of like the villain version of him, has done too much and he's kind of gone too far already. And we've seen kind of like, you know, his body being unstable. We've seen the setup already. You know what I mean? Like for the Akira-esque, he's gonna get really grotesque and disgusting or whatever, and then he's gonna probably die or be defeated, and it's gonna be very bittersweet. But I do think, again, I've been saying it 100 times, I sound like a broken record, I do think that somehow Deku is gonna give Tenko or Shigaraki the ability to kill All For One, or to do something extremely heroic kind of in that light, right? And he'll be celebrated for being the person who took out All For One by the people who know, maybe even just Deku or the students. But I think that is going to be his heroic moment, and then he's going to have to atone by dying, right? Or he's going to have to like die, because we can't just have Shigaraki walking around in the world and like being a good guy. I feel like that would be really weird. I don't think anyone would really accept him, and I think that it's better to just give him kind of like the narrative W, right? Like giving him the chance to be a hero, but then taking it away, right? Because it should be. And I'm fine in those kind of moments because I feel like that again approaches that question of what is a hero, really? Like if a person like Shigaraki Tomura can be heroic in a moment, right? then what is a hero really? You know what I mean? What is a villain really? It seems like a very, very like rigid thing to just label somebody, when if you give Tomura Shigaraki, or like if you give him the chance to be heroic, to get rid of All For One, to do the right thing, what is he gonna do? And I feel like that question of like, what do you do when the time comes, when it's time for you to act? What do you do? And I definitely think that because of Deku, we're going to see a moment where Shigaraki's body just moves on its own and he kills All For One. And it's going to be a very kind of cool moment. It's going to be like the most heroic thing he ever did, because obviously he's getting rid of the overlord of evil, but then I think he's going to die, right? So let's see how we get there. By the end of the chapter, there's a little bit of a white space in between Deku and Ochako standing there talking about, we'll put a stop to them for sure, and All For One's face. So that lets me know maybe a little time has gone by, as like a kind of a little break in between the events going on and the events we're seeing next. Because at the very end of the chapter, we see All For One flick a little thing in his remote, or maybe it's actually like a little phone or communicator device, right? That's probably more likely what it is. And saying, "Shall we?" on the day of the operation when everything is about to go down. So I don't know exactly if the next chapter is going to be the very beginning of the war arc, but if we remember how it kind of started last time, it does feel like it does feel like we are at least maybe a chapter or two away. Like if we see anything else, it's going to be something probably small or something like, you know, involving setup or something else like that. But I do think we're going to kind of get into it now. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to what happens next chapter in My Hero Academia next week. And thank you guys for being here. Sorry for taking January off. It was a little bit of a stressful month. And, you know, January kind of sucks as far as YouTube goes. So hopefully you're locked back in for more My Hero content. I've got some new stuff coming to the channel for you guys. I'm going to be talking about The Legend of Vox Machina on Amazon. So please look out for that and tell me if you're excited for that in my comment section below. And yeah, this has been my chapter review for My Hero Academia chapter 342. I'll see you guys later. It's Vocal Pineapple. Peace.